We stopped pretty much at part 2, right? No. No? Where did we get? I don't remember where we got left. Where was I thought? What page did we leave off? 53? 43? Yeah, well that's pretty close to part 2. Part 2 starts on page 51. Okay, so what is the deal with the crystal merchant? What's the relationship between the boy and the crystal merchant?
He takes him in and gives him jobs.
Right. That's right. On the surface, I mean that's their relationship. That's the difference between the two. I'm sorry. That's not what I want to say. That's their relationship. What is the difference between the two? What's the difference between the boy and the crystal merchant?
The boy is chasing his dream, getting his goal, and the guy's what the glass merchant is doing.
The crystal merchant, you'll see he kind of gives up, but at the same time, he kind of morphs into this cautionary tale that Quello was trying to impart to his audience. Now, the boy's been working for the crystal merchant for a little while, and he decides that he wants to build, it's on page 52, I'd like to build a display case for the crystal. We could place it outside and attract those people who pass at the bottom of the hill, which is a good idea. Now, the merchant says, I've never had one before. People will pass by and bump into it and pieces will be broken. Well, when I took my sheep through the fields, some of them might have died if we had come upon a snake, but that's the way life is with sheep and with shepherds. And so, basically all that the boy is wanting to do is just expand the business, and the old man, or the merchant, is just afraid to take a chance. And we see at the bottom of 53, he says, I don't much like change. You and I aren't like Hassan, that rich merchant. If he makes a buying mistake, it doesn't affect him much. But we too have to live with our mistakes. So since he's not nearly as wealthy, right? If he messes up in business and it costs him money, it's going to cost him serious money compared to someone. It's like that saying, like it takes money to make money. If you don't have a lot of money, the risks are obviously greater for you. Now, but the upside, right, to taking a risk, if you'd have a lot to lose, is you also have a lot to gain. So on 54, he says, I want to get back to my sheep faster. We have to take advantage when luck is on our side and do as much to help it as it's going to help us. It's called principle of favorability or beginner's luck. Now, what is the conflict that the merchant has? What's the merchant's problem?
He's become too used to, like, his goal. If he achieved it, he thinks he'd be disappointed with it. So
right. Well, what's the reason that he took the boy in the first place? Why didn't he take the shepherd in? It's because he's a Muslim. He's a good practicing Muslim, and he's required to. Even if he didn't want to, he's required to take him in because of their faith. Now, along with that, what is another requirement that the merchant says of the Muslim faith?
To go to
Mecca. Right, to make the pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, why doesn't he do that?
Because he's scared that he won't have no more gold.
Well, That's partly, he's scared, but it's not that he won't have any goals, and we're going to get that in a second. But look at the bottom of 54 before we do. It says, Mecca is a lot further away than the pyramids. When I was young, all I wanted to do was put together enough money to start this shop. I thought that someday I'd be rich and could go to Mecca. I began to make some money, but I could never bring myself to leave someone in charge of the shop. The crystals are delicate things. At the same time, people were passing my shop all the time, heading for Mecca. Some of them were rich pilgrims, traveling in caravans with servants and camels. But most of the people making the pilgrimage were poorer than I. So he really didn't need the shop, right? He already had enough money to do it. Why don't you go to Mecca now? Because it's the thought of Mecca that keeps me alive. That's what helps me face these days that are all the same. These mute crystals on the shelves and lunch and dinner at that same horrible cafe. I'm afraid that if my dream is realized, I'll have no reason to go on living. You dream about your sheep and the pyramids, but you're different from me because you want to realize your dreams. I just want to dream about Mecca. I've already imagined 1,000 times crossing the desert, arriving at the plaza of the sacred stone, the 7 times I walk around it before allowing myself to touch it. I've already imagined the people who would be at my side and those in front of me, and the conversations and prayers we would wish to share. But I'm afraid that it would all be a disappointment, so I prefer just to dream about it. Now, this is one of the saddest tales in the book. And he uses this pilgrimage to Mecca because it makes it all the more tragic. Basically this guy, the one thing that he's wanted to do his entire life, just the one trip, the one journey, the one thing that he felt obliged to do, that he had to do, and he worked his entire life for that. Somewhere along the line, that dream morphed into a fantasy. Because there's a difference between a fantasy and a dream. And he doesn't say that here. He doesn't say the word fantasy in here, but that's exactly what it is. I mean, fantasies are fantasies because once they become reality, they're no longer a fantasy. And that's different than a dream. And see, that's what happened. And so what's so tragic about this, first of all, is that the one thing that you build up in your mind, or this guy, like, he builds it up in his mind over and over and over years and years and years, and imagines, all the different ways, the people that would be next to him, what it would be like to cross the desert, what that exact moment would be like, and that dream manifests itself into something that's completely unrealistic, right? And now at this point, it's a complete fantasy, and he realizes that, and so realizing that, once he achieved that goal, once he was actually there, it would fall short of his dreams because he'd been building it up for so long. And nothing that you build up in your imagination can ever be as good in real life as something that you've put on a pedestal and made your entire life goal, but never had the guts to actually go for it or go do it. And that's something that we see all the time. I mean, that's something that we see all the time with people that, like I said, they've got the one place that they want to go. They've got the one thing that they want to do, and they know so much about it. They're well read about the subject or about the place, and they talk about this one thing that they're going to do all the time, but they never do it. And eventually, over time, with enough time, they will never go do it because it's just that innate realization, like, you've got to know that it will never be as good as what you've made it up to be if you've been waiting this long to do something. And what makes it all the more tragic for this man is that this is his spiritual and religious obligation, right? This is the one thing that he's done everything else, right? This is the one thing that he can do, and this is Mecca's like the holy land for him, and so that's the one thing he can do. It's the holy place it's a holy place for him, and that's so tragic to know that a holy place will fall short of your dreams, simply because he didn't have the guts to go and do it, or became too preoccupied with his own business, right, or with the crystals, and not trusting anyone enough to take care of them. Because ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, what's more important, or what would have been more important, the loss of a few crystals, or his store falling into the wrong hands, or fulfilling his religious obligations or his religious duties. And that's the one thing he has left to do. And so again, like I said, that's the one thing that's what makes this guy's case so tragic, and all the more so because it's tied up with his religion, and he realizes it. He knows it. You know, it's like he knows that he's too afraid to go, too afraid of change, and that he's built up this place, this pilgrimage in his mind to where once he actually arrives, it could never achieve or come even close to what he'd always imagined it to be. And that's, again, you know, a lot of that too is not, it's not just giving up on your dreams. Oh, if you log off, I'll be so fast. It's not just giving up on your dreams, whatever. It's also the idea of projecting what we assume, right, from our own backgrounds and onto something else or onto someone else. I mean, I've talked to you guys about, I know I have in my 1302 class about like getting together with someone or having a relationship with someone, and you project all the things that you want them to be onto that person, right? But they're not that person. Like, you can't really accept who they are. When you find out that, like, okay, I'm convinced that you're going to be this person because I want you to be this person. Well, then that can only last for so long in a relationship, and then reality sets in, and you're like, oh shit, this is not that person, right? They're who they are, and we do that all the time, and that's when real problems can start to occur if you're that kind of person that pushes other characteristics on people, and that can be a real problem. And we do that not only. I mean, and everybody does that. It's a normal human thing to do, and we do that not only with people, but we do that with situations. We do that with life expectations, and like I said, that need to push what we want, push what we fantasize or dream about, and either being upset when the reality sits in that this is not what I expected, but you have no reason to expect differently. Right? The difference between going in with an open mind and going in with a very closed, or not a closed mind, but with a forceful mind. Like you're forcing you can, in a relationship, right? You can force characteristics. You can force how you want a person to be, but they're not that person. In a situation, in a life choice, you can force yourself to believe for a little while that, okay, this is going to be this way. This is going to turn out like this. But when you're not accepting of the reality of the situation, that's when a lot of strain and heartbreak can set in. And ultimately, that's what Coelho talks about with the giving up of the dream, like when a child has all these dreams and you give up on them whenever we're younger or whenever reality sets in, and that's because as a child you don't understand reality, and so it can be heartbreaking or it can be rough to accept reality for what it is, and not at the same time not give up on those dreams or not give up on those goals. And so we see on 56, some time has passed, and it says he was proud of himself. He had learned some important things, like how to deal in crystal and about the language without words and about omens. One afternoon he had seen a map at the top of the hill, complaining that it was impossible to find a decent place to get something to drink after such a climb. The boy, accustomed to recognizing omens, spoke to the merchant. Let's sell tea to the people who climb the hill. Lots of places sell tea. But we could sell tea in the crystal glasses, and they, of course, end up making more money. And on the bottom 57, he says, the merchant says, I've had the shop for 30 years. I know good crystal from bad, and everything else that is there to know. Everything else there is to know about crystal. I know its dimensions and how it behaves. If we serve tea and crystal, the shop is going